Welcome to this episode of our program Daily Debate. I'm Mona Moselhi, sitting here on behalf of my colleague Ahmed Nader. Today we'll be speaking about a very important debate, an important meeting that is taking place in Cairo. Here, Cairo is hosting a meeting or several meetings for the Libyan parties that are being held under the auspices of the United Nations. That meeting is to discuss settling outstanding issues between the Libyan Parliament and the High Council of State, and to agree on the constitutional basis to help organize elections as soon as possible and as required and acquired by the Libyan people and the whole international community. Delegates from the House of Representatives in the Eastern Libya and the High Council of State in Tripoli chose 12 members from each side to participate in the talks. The Libyan Parliament spokesman explained that the talks will continue until April 20, as the consensus of the Parliament and the High Council of State on the Constitution require amendments to its controversial articles before the referendum. The media advisor to the Libyan Parliament explained that the meeting of the Parliament and High Council of State committee in Cairo aims at reaching an understanding on the controversial points of the draft constitution, which have been met with great protests from several Libyan political parties and social components. According to the spokesman, the points involves the regime and its nature, as well as the status of the parliament. We'll be discussing this in our episode tonight. Before we delve into our discussion, let's first have a quick look on the top story, top stories of the day. And President Abdel al-Sisi instructed to count the number of prisoners indicted and to study the cases in preparation for the release of a batch of them ahead of Eid al-Fitr. President Sisi ordered to boost the efforts of the National Committee for establishing an integrated vision to reduce the number of indicted and limit the phenomenon of fines. The head of state also urged setting regulations to deal with the issue through pre-actions within the framework of the presidential initiative Egypt Without Indebted People. The president's directives came during a meeting with Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and Minister of Social Solidarity Nabil Al-Qabbaj on Sunday. During the meeting, Al-Qabbaj reviewed the latest achievements of the committee in limiting the numbers of indebted across the country's governorates and to provide awareness in financial advisors, as well as safe mechanisms for easy lending and extending the umbrella of the social protection programs for eligible families of indebted. The meeting also tackled the presentation for the work of civil society organizations during the past years in Upper Egypt and the future plans for developing several sectors, especially the digital transformation and the information management systems. Later in the day, President Sisi also held another meeting with Prime Minister Dr. Madbouli and a number of ministers, as well as President of the National Council for Women, Dr. Maya Morsi. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Sam Radi said that the meeting followed up on the National Program for Women, community leaders, and the latest updates of development of Egyptian family national projects. During the meeting, President Sisi directed to enhance the role of civil communities and means of coordination between them and the pioneer women system regarding their significance and important feedback in the society. Meanwhile, the President ordered to continue cooperation between the concerned parties to boost the project of developing the Egyptian family in preparation for the launch of its first phase. President Sisi also instructed to hold periodic evaluation for the project's outcome at the aim of achieving the utmost goals in all its coming phases. Right, and before we move on to discussing our topic of tonight, let's first have a quick look on this report and we'll come back for more discussion.
Egypt hosted over the weekend the inter-Libyan meetings between the Joint Committee of the House of Representatives and the High State Council in a bid to reach an agreement on the constitutional basis for the Libyan election. The talks tackled the executive mechanisms required to approve the constitutional and legislative basis for the national elections in Libya. Libyan sources said that the meetings were positive and the participants were keen on ensuring Libya's national interest. The head of the Egyptian National Committee on Libya has welcomed Libyan parties participating in the meetings of the Libyan Constitutional Course Committee. He conveyed to them the greetings of President Abdel al-Sisi, affirming Egypt's constant support to the Libyan people in a way that helps achieve peace and stability in Libya. The UN-sponsored Cairo-hosted meetings urged the international community to support institutions representing the Libyan people to back consensus among Libyan parties as the only way to end the crisis. The Cairo meeting reviewed the developments of the situation in Libya and efforts to restore security and stability in the country. President Abdel al-Sisi stressed the continuation of Egypt's unwavering position towards achieving the supreme interest of the Libyan state, preserving Libya's unity and territorial integrity, restoring security and stability, having a unified national army, and ending foreign intervention in the country.
Right, welcome back, and let me welcome our guest, Dr. Nabil Abdel Moula, strategic planning expert. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure being with you and your audience.
Thank you so much. And we start speaking about a very critical case of Libya, because it has been years that we were, of course, Egypt and all Libyans are aspiring for the settlement of this brotherly country. Today we are hosting in Egypt the Libyan parties to discuss the whole issue from the very beginning, starting with the constitution and the basis of the constitution to build momentum on what will be achieved here. First, let me see or read your reading to the whole situation before we go into details of the meeting itself.
My personal readings is according to what is happening since a few years ago, since 2011 or 2010 and so on. There has been real conflict inside Libya itself, inside the few Libyan parts themselves, east and west and so on. Libyan people currently and recently, according to the efforts which President El-Sisi and a few other international parties has been trying to do, is trying to conclude all such parties together, to gather them together for trying to find a solution for all of them. Meaning they are trying to do the necessary approach for all the parties to get together and at least to reach to a closer meeting point with each other for the parliament, for elections, for presidency type and resources, how they can deal with each other, just to give a final result at the end, which is Libya, the Libya country.
Right. If we speak about the meeting that is hosted here by Egypt, and this is not the first meeting that Egypt hosts, because Egypt has hosted several meetings before for all the tribes of Libya and for all the parties before. How do you weigh the seriousness of this very particular meeting?
I hope they are serious enough to understand, and I think they are serious enough to understand that they are in a very serious situation, according to the country itself, to the wealthy and prosperity of their people, and it is time for them, I think, to come to an end, to find a real ground, solid ground for all of them to stand together and to step aside and to set aside whatever the conflict is for the sake of the prosperity of their people. And I believe they are coming to an end for this, which is they realized that it's time to do that.
Several times we've said that they have realized, particularly when they at least left aside all the militias that were affiliated to each side and started to prepare for a serious government and parliament. If we speak about points of contention, now there have been some points before. They were overcame during the past period in a way or another. Now, what are the contentious points that we are speaking about in this very particular meeting?
This particular meeting must come with a real result. They must come all together for results of the elections, for the presidency, how would it look like, who is going to rule, how they will do the elections, whom is going to do what for which party. And also it's time for them not to rely on international countries or stop international interference, the outside interference from other parties into the countries.
That's a big point that we need to pinpoint our finger on. But when we speak about, they came here in order to put a constitution, or at least find consensus on a constitution that would be the basis for the shape of their country and how will their country look like. Or how do you think the reforms that should be put, or how do you think parties, from what we have seen on the ground, how would parties put together a constitution, or what kind of reforms do the constitution need to be put upon?
Actually, they should, or they must, think about the interests of the country and their people first. They must think about how would they like to see their country in the very near future, which is almost, as we say, the elections at the end of the year. That's why the Libyan Prime Minister has stressed the need for general elections and the removal of mercenaries from the country itself. As long as you got mercenaries inside the country and you got conflicts inside the country, you got international conflicts for whatever the party is, that means there are still parties belong to other parties from outside Libya. So I believe they should know that this is the time to start talking together and to minimize or eliminate, not elimination, but to minimize the points of differences between the parties themselves for the sake of the people.
You know, sir, you're speaking about the most important issue that we are seeking to extradite all the mercenaries and all the outside powers who are influencing the status of Libya. But to reach that, there should be some strong institutions, and to have strong institutions, then there should be a base, and there should be elections. And hence, for an instant, the spokesman for the presidency of the Libyan parliament said that among the controversial points is the nature of the regime itself. Because before the so-called Arab Spring, because we've not seen any springs, but before this, it was the presidential system. Now, after, or what we have seen in the recent years, it was a parliamentary one where the parliament chose a prime minister, and upon his strength, he was able to control the situation on the ground. But before even reaching that, there were the east and the west sides of Libya, that is beside all what is going on in the south. So, first here, how do you view the importance of setting at least the nature of the regime and the status of the parliament? Because that has been the contentious issue. Certain odds in relations between those two sides.
This is a very important point, actually, and they do understand this. That's why they are still in conflict with each other. Each party would like to show off the capability of each party, the backup and the support from local district, from where they belong, each party and each other. And also they show off the international support either in public or even in hidden way. But from my own point of view also, I think they have reached in a way or another to an understanding that it's time to understand that the international community would not leave them go in the same way, because lots of countries right now are living in a mess. And I believe Egypt has a very big role and a central role in such talks and in such meetings and conversations and discussions and whatever would like to call, because it is a strategic partnership. They are on the borderlines of Egypt. Egypt is helping them a lot, and in a way or another, they will reach to an agreement on how the presidency would look like. Is it a presidency or a presidency with parliament? That's why even both houses of parliaments and House of Representatives are attending here in such meetings to try to figure out the framework for how both houses will be working together to set up such a framework.
When we speak about the meetings here, There are two parties who are really meeting here. And those parties are the Libyan Parliament and the High Council of States. Now, on the ground in Libya, the situation is totally different.
That's right.
Because we have seen a prime minister refusing to give the helm to his successor. And the situation is complicated where who has the strength on the ground more than the other. This is why my first question to you, sir, was how serious these meetings are and solid, and would the outcome be consolidated through parties in Libya itself?
I believe by time, yes. Yes, it's time to do so, because the real Libyan people who is living in Libya, Egypt, and the international parties, which is in their sake that they would like to see Libya in the even stable and in a way or another. Yes, I believe by time they are realizing, by time when time flies, they are realizing that they have no other way, because neither Egypt nor the international community need another conflict, especially in when we talk about Libya with its resources for the oil, and for other for the great period of the great space of their land and so on. Libyan people themselves and the parties, they are realizing that they are not going to be left alone. They are not going to be left to work on their own. Even they were supported by international hating parties through mercenaries existed in the country itself and exist in different countries. Yes, they will realize this, and they will get rid of this. Yes, they will reach to a point of agreement in a way or another.
Hopefully, we are all hoping for that, and definitely Egypt's role is immense, because each time Egypt was the reason for settling down the situation or calming down the situation, at least in Libya. But let me here take another important issue. Now, the international community that is represented in the United Nations, which has been sponsoring the whole talks of Libya ever since the NATO interfered and all what was created in Libya. Now, the UN view that elections would be the only way out or breakthrough for Libya to start a state, a real state that has a role instead of this failed so far state. What do you think about that, and how do you view the role of the UN so far?
Good. UN has a view or a vision for firstly, for the problem itself and for Egypt. And UN, in any international event, directly or indirectly, they believe that Egypt has a very big role. And UN consider that or confirm that Egypt can play a very important role in the supporting Libya's stability. They do believe this, the UN organization. UN special envoy to Libya, Yorandino Leon, has stressed Egypt's utmost importance in helping stabilizing the situation in Libya. The UN envoy said that Egypt can play a very important role in Libya's stability, but he understands very well Egypt's legitimate concerns, which is very important, about terrorism and the presence of militias close to Al-Qaeda operating over there. So that means, and he continued saying, I think that these are legitimate concerns for Egypt, and we must work together to ensure that Libya does not become an incubator for terrorism, and we should work to develop a common strategy towards Libya, and we will discuss that in New York. They will discuss that, especially since the Security Council resolution 2174 clearly emphasized that the importance of the political dialogue to get out of the current crisis in Libya. That means the UN understands very well how important the situation over there, and they are trying to help. In the meantime, they do understand that Egypt has a very big role or a central role in these situations. Also, he said everyone acknowledged that the political differences and mistrust, which has been generated between parties over there, stressed the need to overcome the differences, end the fighting and resume political process. That's why we all confirm, and they listen and they hear everywhere and all the time, that political process is the only way to reach to stable Libya, one nation Libya. Meanwhile, he contended Libyan parliament spokesman denied news that the council has signed an agreement with all rumors, which is being put from time to time to try to fire back in both parties, locally or internationally, with different countries, local or neighborhood or international countries. And he confirmed he always speaks up and try to explain the wrong news, and which would affect all negotiations and discussions occurs from time to time.
This is the new invite, the UN new invite, where the meetings here are really attended by the Special Advisor of the UN Secretary General for Libya, Stephanie Williams. But the UN has a long role that has been played during the past. We're speaking about almost 11 years now. And on the different stages, there haven't been any kind of tangible or touchable and effective results. We'll be discussing more about Libya and the developments in Libya and the UN role, and definitely Egypt's role, plus the foreign intervention in the Libyan domestic affairs and the influence of those powers inside Libya. But before we continue on with that, let me first take this second report and the talks between the Libyan Parliament and the High Council of State. Let's watch.
Talks between the Libyan Parliament and the High Council of State, HCS, concluded in Cairo over the weekend in the presence of the United Nations Support Mission to discuss an agreement on the constitutional framework necessary for holding general elections in Libya during the coming period. The Special Advisor of the UN Secretary General on Libya, Stephanie Williams, extended her sincere thanks and appreciation to the Egyptian government for hosting the Libyan peace talks between the Parliament and HCS. She stressed that the United Nations seeks to find a political solution to the Libyan crisis. In an opening speech, Williams referred to the role of Egypt and other countries affected by the Libyan crisis, adding that the United Nations seek through talks and consultations with partners to ensure security and stability in Libya. Moreover, the UN official pointed out that the talks hosted by Cairo constitute a golden opportunity for the Libyan Parliament and the HCS to achieve a consensus that meets the aspirations of the Libyan people towards stability and security.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Nabil, and we were speaking about the UN role. And as we said, the UN has been taking under its auspices the talks of Libya, plus many of course, world crises. But throughout almost 11 years now?
Yeah, almost, yeah.
We haven't seen any kind of settlement to the issue. And some would really doubt how the UN is managing the situation here, and are they really playing an effective role in order to be able to settle the situation? And others would doubt, do the international community really want to settle the issue inside Libya?
The international community, from my point of view, international community, they pretend that they would like to settle the issues in Libya. And the UN declares so many times and several times in different occasions and in all international events that they are keen to settle the situation in Libya, to have the Libya stable and up and running. But actually, the seriousness of the procedures and the decisions which they are making is not strong enough to support whatever required for finalizing such situation, especially when you are telling me right now or saying, and we all know that it's almost 11 years. 11 years in a country where...
11 years in Libya, same in Syria, and decades
Arab
in
Spring
the
countries.
Palestinian-Israeli issue, and other decades in the in Iraq issue. I mean, it's a long story.
That's correct. That's why you always rely on the parties whom are really concerned about the issue of the problem itself. If it is on the neighboring countries, is it far? Are the mutual benefits between such country and the country which is interested? That's why Egypt is always trying to stress the importance and trying to gather the parties together all the time and all year round, trying to approach to have to do the necessary approach between parties to minimize the differences and conflict between them. And hopefully Egypt will succeed in this. I hope so.
We all hope, especially Egypt. But okay, from your point of view, what would be the foundations for a political solution in Libya, and what should be the starting point for any political settlement? And how far is that starting point far-fetched from being implemented or achieved, at least?
The political resolution which would occur, and if they could come to a solid ground, leaving aside the benefits of the persons whom are ruling right now, and the advantages of the international bodies or countries, whatever would like to call, whom are supporting different parties. If they could agree on the type of presidency or elections which will happen, whom is going to do what, and if they decided together that there will be democratic elections, there will be elections somehow, whatever the election is, all parties will accept the result of the elections. Resources of the petroleum, resources of everything, they should know, they should come to a joint agreement on how it will be split, or how it will be used for the benefit of the Libyan people themselves. If they have left aside the nature of the country itself over there for the people, because they are tribes from different ethnics and different parties, and if they have if they have left all this and came together to the result that we are Libyan, whatever, I'm from which part in Libya, I'm Libyan, and whatever the resource will be used, it will be used safely by the elected people, the elected president, elected parliament, elected House of Representatives, and so on. When they come together to that end, that means there will be a political solution.
The problem in Libya is that it's a tribal
yeah.
Country with claims, and who are in control or who have the strength on the ground would be able to control the situation. But and this is why one of the issues that Egypt has insisted on was getting all together all tribes in order to find consensus and prioritize the interest of Libya at large. But also one of the issues that Egypt has repeatedly called on was the lifting of the UN arms embargo on Libya. And that, in order to strengthen the national Libyan army to be able to defend itself from the armed militias and mercenaries, existing mercenaries sent from the outside players. From your point of view, how important is such a demand Egypt has called from the United Nations, and how far has the international community and the United Nations responded so far to such a demand?
This is very strange and weird situation. The UN has called for the embargo when the Arab League has asked for this, or when the Arabs has asked for this, and now they are not responding positive when the Arab League is asking for lifting the embargo, which leaves the situation of the national army in Libya in a very hectic situation, actually, because they are part mercenaries and the far part from Libya. They are being different countries are sending lots of arms for them, indirectly or in a hidden way or indirectly. Still, the national team cannot do this. So the embargo actually is on official and national army of Libya. So it is very important, yes, very important and very crucial for the UN to respond positively and the international community respond positively for lifting that embargo, for enabling the national army of Libya for being armed well, and for allowing the balance of the power inside Libya to be not even the balance. The national army normally must be the strongest party in the country itself, because it is the body who is in charge for defending the Libya and Libyan people, of course. But how will the Arabs, how will Egypt, how will we're not sure yet, because they are not. UN is not responding in that matter well.
From the very beginning, and Egypt has exerted its utmost effort in order to resolve or find consensus among all parties, and President Sisi has always reiterated Egypt's unwavered support and effort to help Libyan people to restore peace and security. How do you view the Egyptian role play, or the role played by Egypt so far in this domain, particularly in the Libyan fight?
That takes us actually to talk about the role Egypt support. What did Egypt do for Libya from long time to now, and during the transition period still, which is still in transition period. We can say that Egypt's support for Libya has been an important historical position until the moment, from very long. The Egyptian political leadership is keen to support the Libyan file, and still the Egyptian political leaders is keen to support the Libyan file, and this has been evident in many political, of course, many political positions in recent years. Whatever the event is in Paris, in Berlin, and whatever and wherever it is, Egypt is there. Most recently, Paris conference, for example, and President Sisi keenness to confirm specifics of the Egyptian position in Libya crisis, which starts from a series of tracks. The most important, which is international support for holding presidential and parliamentary elections scheduled on time in December. Departure of foreign, a part of it is the departure of foreign mercenaries and armed groups, which we're talking about right now, from all over Libya, in order to restore political stability. The country has gone through several transitions, and the moment came to restore Libya's stability. This is what always President El-Sisi confirm and say, and always tell through the international events, either directly by himself or through the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
In all the international forums, through the Egyptian leadership itself, or through its
That's
diplomatic...
That's correct. That's correct. They confirmed that, yes. And in the context of the final statement of conference, which supports over Paris, still we are talking about Paris conference, President and the Egyptian state, the importance of commitment of all Libyan actors or representatives whom are representing different parties and different people in Libya, to hold free and credible presidential and legislative elections, because actually this is the only way and the right way to reach to a settlement over there, with a commitment to accept results of the elections. That means all parties must confirm and agree whatever the elections is. They must agree and accept, because this is the only one, the only circumstances and all the conditions which can restore its sovereignty, unity and stability, sought only by dealing seriously, and they must understand this seriously, with the main problem that hinder this, namely the presence of foreign forces, mercenaries and fighters, foreigners on the territory, which is, again, this is a very crucial and important part for the Libyan people, and they must understand this, whatever they are representing whom. Because as long as there are foreign mercenaries, we all know that the mercenaries and foreign troops are always looking for their interests, their own interests and personal interests, not for the country interests. In fact, next stage from Egypt point of view requires Libya to support these efforts to establish a comprehensive political process based on rules that gives them continuity, and the elections will be beginning of addressing the crisis and seeking the stability of state institutions, in which Egypt played and still, that means has played an important, pivotal and historical role in order to stabilize the Arab region, not only Libya. That's why President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received the President of Libya, President of Libya's Presidential Council, and the other party, for trying to clear whatever differences between parties to prepare for the meetings and discussions that Egypt is hosting for all Libyan parties.
There was... President Sisi in Egypt has hosted every head of state in this transitional periods, because Libya has seen transitional periods, not only one. President Sisi has gathered all the tribes here in Egypt. President Sisi has met with all parties concerned. President Sisi has hosted all the prime ministers and all the presidents of the transitional councils, plus, of course, the parliament. We have done everything. If I may speak about the real or core problems that are really hindering Libya from reaching a political solution, would that be put in points as you view the situation?
Firstly, foreign troops, mercenaries, economic resources, and the desire to rule and control the country and the country resources. And finally, which is very important, the international countries, the international community, few bodies whom are having interest in keeping the conflict in Libya and keeping Libya unsafe and unstable as it is, especially when they have conflict in a way or another with Egypt, so they cannot do something with Egypt, so they would be interested in leaving the borderlines with Egypt unstable. Those are the major points, I think, from my point of view.
Can we say that the main point would be a Libyan true will that are not built on personal interests and the influence of external parties trying to grab each side towards his own interests? Can we say that a true will of the Libyans themselves would be a real and determined factor to solve the situation, the whole issue in Libya? Is this enough?
It is enough when they realize this, when they reach to that point that we must act on national, for the benefit of the country itself, for the benefit of the Libyan people, not for the benefit of their personal interest with other international countries or international bodies. Yes, of course.
How do you view the threat?
Because once they have reached to that point and they realize this, they will start to kick the foreign troops outside, mercenaries, they will start kicking them outside. They will see that the economic resources, it's for Libya, it's not for a specific party.
How do you view the threat of the mercenaries and militants who exist on the Libyan soil and the influence they have on the ground over the Libyans themselves, and how is this threatening Libyans from taking a real position or a real conclusion to their status? How do you view the threat and the influence of outside parties who exist in Libya?
When you talk about foreign troops existed in a country, inside the country, when you talk about mercenaries existing on the ground of any country, inside any country, and ruling specific parties in the country itself, specific districts, so you are talking about a country which is not ruling itself. You are talking about international bodies ruling and controlling the country interests and the people themselves. And this is exactly what's happening. When each party is controlling a specific area in Libya, that means we don't have one president, we don't have one rule, we don't have one mind, we don't have the interests of the Libyan people. We have interests of different parties. Especially when you have mercenaries, they are being paid for to fight, whatever the cause for the fight is. But when all such foreign troops and mercenaries would be kicked out, that means there will be only one army to defend all Libyan people. Yes, of course, that would cause a hell of instability for the country itself.
All right. I have only 1 minute left for me here, and your expectations to these talks that are taking place in Egypt?
I believe Egypt is very keen, the keenness of Egypt and President of Egypt, and the efforts of the previous international events in different countries, in Paris and Germany and whatever the events has been held for. In addition to the real situation currently for Libya and Libyan people, I think they would reach to a positive agreement because they are doing such discussions and negotiations and meeting in a positive environment.
We are all hoping for such a conclusion and this result.
That's
Definitely
correct.
we are in need
That's
of
correct.
Libyan settlements.
That's correct.
Dr. Nabil Abdel Moula, strategic planning expert, thank you so much for being with us here tonight and for your input. And I guess that would take us to the end of this episode.
It's my pleasure being with you.
The pleasure is all ours. And that takes us to the end of this episode. I guess tomorrow would be another important debate with another colleague. Good night.